When ruthless humiliation collides with unimaginable power, destiny changes forever. Sophia Bennett had spent 3 long years building her small bakery in Chicago. Countless sleepless nights and endless sacrifices had finally earned her a once-in-a-lifetime invitation to present her signature pastries at an elite culinary summit in Rome. For the first time in her life, she had rewarded herself with a first-class ticket. But despite her success, Sophia still carried the scars of years of cruel judgment. She had learned to smile through pain and pretend that harsh words no longer hurt. As she settled into seat 2A aboard Flight 402, she closed her eyes and imagined the beautiful streets of Rome waiting for her. For a brief moment, happiness filled her heart. Then everything changed. "Excuse me, you're blocking my space." Sophia opened her eyes and found a wealthy businessman standing beside her. His name was Richard Sterling, one of New York's most powerful investors. Instead of taking his seat, he stared at her with open disgust. "You expect me to sit next to this?" he snapped loudly. The entire first-class cabin fell silent. Sophia's cheeks burned with shame. She immediately pulled herself closer to the window. I'm sorry," she whispered. But Richard wasn't finished. "I paid for luxury, not this inconvenience. Move her to economy where she belongs." Tears filled Sophia's eyes. The flight attendant tried to calm the situation, but Richard continued insulting her in front of everyone. Passenger after passenger simply looked away. "I'll make myself smaller," Sophia whispered. "I promise I won't bother you." "Don't speak to me," Richard barked. Just as the flight attendant reached for the intercom, another voice echoed through the cabin. "The lady isn't going anywhere." Everyone turned. A tall man slowly rose from seat 1A. His charcoal suit fit him perfectly. Silver touched the edges of his dark hair, and a thin scar rested beneath his left cheekbone. His cold eyes carried a frightening authority. This was Alessandro Moretti. To the world, he was an Italian billionaire shipping magnate, but in the shadows, he was a man whose name alone made powerful people tremble. And Richard Sterling had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Alessandro Moretti slowly walked down the aisle, his presence alone making the atmosphere feel heavier. Richard Sterling forced a laugh. "This has nothing to do with you," he said arrogantly. Alessandro stopped inches away from him. "It concerns me," he replied calmly, "because I cannot tolerate a man without manners humiliating a woman." Richard scoffed. "She takes up too much space. I paid for luxury." Alessandro's dark eyes narrowed. "You paid for a seat, not superiority." The entire cabin held its breath. "Do you even know who I am?" Richard shouted. Without answering, Alessandro reached into his pocket and removed a satellite phone. He calmly dialed a number. "Marco," he said softly. "Who owns the company that controls this aircraft?" After a brief pause, he nodded. "Good, buy it." Richard burst into laughter. "Have you lost your mind?" Alessandro ignored him. "Add 20% above market value. Transfer the money immediately." He ended the call and quietly slipped the phone back into his pocket. Seconds later, the captain's voice echoed through the speakers. "Attention, crew. We have received confirmation that ownership of this aircraft has been transferred." The cabin erupted in shocked whispers. Their smile disappeared. 2 enormous men suddenly stood up from the rear seats and moved beside Alessandro. Sophia realized they weren't passengers. They were bodyguards. Alessandro turned toward the flight attendant. "As the owner of this aircraft, I believe I have the right to decide who remains on board." "Yes, sir," the stunned attendant answered. Alessandro finally looked at Richard. There was no anger in his eyes, only ice. "Richard Sterling," he said quietly, "you are now trespassing on my property." Richard's face turned pale. "You can't do this. You should have learned how to speak to a lady." With a simple gesture, Alessandro's guards grabbed the terrified businessman. "Wait! My luggage." "We'll send it to you," Alessandro answered coldly. "Economy class delivery." Moments later, Richard Sterling was dragged off the plane in complete humiliation. But Alessandro wasn't finished. He slowly turned toward the silent passengers who had watched Sophia suffer without saying a word. "And the rest of you?" His voice echoed through the cabin. You saw cruelty and chose silence. You will not fly with me. Within minutes, the entire first-class cabin was emptied. Only Sophia remained frozen in seat 2A, and for the first time, Alessandro's cold expression softened. He handed her a white handkerchief and spoke gently. You, Miss Bennet, are my guest, and together, we are going to Rome. The giant Boeing 777 crossed the Atlantic like a ghost ship. Behind the curtains of first class, only 4 people remained on board. Sophia, Alessandro, and his 2 silent bodyguards. Sophia still couldn't believe what had happened. Who buys an entire airplane just to defend a stranger? As the seatbelt sign turned off, Alessandro moved into the seat beside her. May I? He asked politely. Sophia nodded nervously. Up close, she could smell his expensive cologne and something mysterious she couldn't explain. I never introduced myself properly, he said softly. Alessandro Moretti. Sophia Bennet. She looked down at her hands. Mr. Moretti, thank you. But you didn't have to do all of that. Alessandro smiled slightly. Money exists to solve problems. That man was a problem. Then his expression changed. But tell me something, Sophia. Why did you apologize to him? Sophia lowered her eyes. Because he wasn't completely wrong. I'm used to people judging me. It's easier to apologize. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Never apologize for existing. His voice carried incredible intensity. The world is full of small men who try to make women feel smaller. You do not shrink for anyone. Sophia felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her like that. For the first time in years, warmth slowly returned to her heart. Trying to change the subject, Alessandro smiled. So what brings you to Rome? Sophia carefully opened her temperature-controlled box. Inside were beautiful handmade pastries. My grandmother's recipe, she said shyly. Alessandro picked one up. The moment he tasted it, his eyes closed. For several seconds, the dangerous billionaire disappeared. In his place stood a man remembering home. Naples, he whispered. My mother used to make these. Sophia smiled brightly. And for the next 8 hours, the empty plane became their private world. They talked about dreams, about struggles, about loneliness. Sophia discovered that beneath Alessandro's frightening reputation was a lonely man, carrying countless burdens. And Alessandro discovered something he had almost forgotten. Peace. But as the Italian coastline appeared in the distance, his satellite phone suddenly vibrated. The warmth vanished from his face. His bodyguards immediately stood up. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Alessandro. What happened? He stared out the window, then finally spoke. Someone knows we're landing, and they're waiting for us. It's an ambush. The moment Flight 402 landed in Rome, everything changed. Alessandro had removed his jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white shirt. His eyes no longer held warmth. They held war. His bodyguards, Luca and Matteo, pulled out suppressed weapons as they prepared for the attack. Sophia's entire body trembled. Those are guns, she whispered. Alessandro stepped closer. Look at me, Sophia. His deep voice calmed her racing heart. My enemies are waiting outside. My men and I will protect you. You stay behind Matteo and do exactly as I say. Tears filled her eyes. I'm just a baker. I don't belong in this world. Alessandro gently held her face. You crossed an ocean to fight for your dream. You are stronger than you think. Just be brave for 3 more minutes. Sophia nodded. Then suddenly, she looked down. My pastry box. Matteo almost looked offended. Bullets were waiting outside, and she was worried about pastries. But Alessandro immediately grabbed the box. I've got it. Moments later, the plane door opened. Gunfire exploded. The sounds were deafening. Chaos erupted everywhere. Matteo pushed Sophia toward the stairs. Run! Bullets struck the Boeing 777 as men hidden around the runway opened fire. An armored Maserati raced toward them while Alessandro stood exposed, returning fire and protecting everyone. Sofia reached the vehicle in tears. Seconds later, Alessandro jumped inside beside her, still holding her precious recipe box. Drive! The SUV sped away as bullets shattered the rear windows. Sofia curled into a ball, shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, she felt something warm. Alessandro's jacket. He had wrapped it around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he said softly. Hours later, they arrived at Alessandro's enormous estate outside Rome. It looked like a palace. But inside, Sofia realized something. Despite all the luxury, Alessandro was alone. That evening, unable to calm her fears, Sofia entered the kitchen. "When I'm scared," she said quietly, "I bake." For hours, the scent of vanilla and sugar filled the mansion, and Alessandro stayed beside her, watching, smiling. For the first time in years, peace entered his lonely world. Eventually, Sofia offered him one of her pastries. As their eyes met, neither spoke, but the air between them changed. Slowly, Alessandro walked closer. "Sofia." Before another word could leave his mouth, the kitchen doors burst open. Luca stood there, breathing heavily. "Boss!" His face was pale. "We have a problem. The men we sent to Sofia's hotel, they're all dead. And someone left a message. The attack at the airport was only the beginning. Tomorrow, they're coming for her." Sofia stared at Alessandro in disbelief. "You want me to stay hidden?" Alessandro's face remained serious. "Those men will turn the summit into a battlefield. If you go, you could die." But something inside Sofia had changed. Her whole life, she had made herself smaller for others. Not anymore. "If I don't go," she said firmly, "then I've already lost." Alessandro looked into her eyes. For the first time, he saw not fear, but fire. Slowly, a small smile appeared on his face. "You truly are extraordinary, Sofia." The next morning, the prestigious culinary summit began. Sofia arrived wearing a beautiful burgundy gown that Alessandro had personally chosen for her. Beside her stood the powerful Italian billionaire himself. "Smile," he whispered. "You belong here." As Sofia prepared her pastries, Alessandro's men quietly protected every corner of the building. Then, suddenly, his earpiece crackled. "Boss! 3 armed men are inside." Everything happened in seconds. Gunfire erupted. People screamed. Crystal chandeliers shattered. Without hesitation, Alessandro threw himself over Sofia, shielding her with his own body. But one assassin broke through. He aimed directly at Alessandro, and in that moment, Sofia acted. Grabbing a heavy cast-iron pan from her display, she swung with all her strength. The man's leg snapped. Before he could recover, Alessandro disarmed him. The attack ended, and against all odds, Sofia's pastries survived. Minutes later, the judges gathered. Even surrounded by broken glass and chaos, Sofia proudly presented her grandmother's recipe. The first bite left the judges speechless. Tears filled their eyes. "Perfection," one of them whispered. That same day, Sofia Bennett won the Grand Culinary Award of Rome. 1 month later, her new bakery opened in Chicago. Business flourished, peace had returned, and one quiet afternoon, the bell above the door rang. Sofia looked up. Standing there was Alessandro, but this time he wasn't a feared king of the shadows. He was simply a man in love. "I heard the owner of this bakery protects her kitchen fiercely," he said with a smile. Sofia laughed. "And I heard a certain Italian billionaire likes sweets." She wrapped her arms around him, and Alessandro held her tightly, finally finding the happiness money had never been able to buy. From humiliation on a plane to love in the heart of Rome, Sofia learned that true strength isn't measured by appearances. It's measured by courage, and sometimes the people who save us end up becoming home. वीडियो में आपको सबसे ज़्यादा क्या अच्छा लगा, कमेंट में ज़रूर बताएं और जाते जाते चैनल को भी सब्सक्राइब कर दें।